Hey, it's Mark here with Brands Investors Love. And today I've got a very special treat. Now, normally I talk to investors or I talk to startup founders and I get their perspective on what they think a brand investors love needs or what they see missing from certain startup brands. But today I'm going to take a look from the other end of the telescope. I'm going to take a look from the big brand perspective and see what there is to learn from an expert who works almost exclusively on big brands, although he's had quite a bit of experience with startups as well. But I want to get a fresh perspective, the big brand perspective, so that startup entrepreneurs can understand what the big guys are doing really, really well. It's Peter Rodriguez. He is a CMO, fractional CMO for a number of companies, also the founder of Brand Igniter, and one of the smartest people in the brand hemisphere that I know, and I know quite a few folks. Peter, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks to all of your audience. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, no, I think there's going to be a whole lot of people excited to hear what you've got to say. So you, like me, you started off working in big brands, but unlike me, I went to the startup field, and you still almost exclusively consult with the bigs. So give me a few of the names that you've worked with.
Well, it would be Pfizer, Nestle, J&J, Smucker, Kellogg's, and more recently, Kruger Products and Queen's Executive Education, Mondelez International, and so forth. So
So
those are.
you are a fountain of information on what big brands do to make their brands work.
Well, I have been very blessed. From a corporate perspective, I had the opportunity to run many businesses and brands in North America with all of these companies, with Pfizer, Nestle, J&J, Smucker, and Kellogg's at a time when they needed to do big changes to their brands. So, and that meant having a Canadian strategy developed and executed. And that gave me all of that opportunity to do it at a time when it was needed. So, that all of the things that I talk about come from the knowledge and insight and success and failure of doing work for brands that hover, that could go anywhere between 20, 30, 80 million, 120 million, and portfolios that get to 400 million.
Now,
So,
what's interesting though is I've done this a couple of times too with brands. So like Mr. Clean was my last big one, but brands that need transformation. There's a lot to be learned for a big brand person when they're dealing with a brand that needs to throw away a bunch of old stuff and keep some old stuff and build a whole bunch of new stuff. And I think that'd be valuable for startup founders as well. So what was your experience with that?
well, I have a number of them, but I want to talk about one that could relate, that a lot of people can relate, because the problems that we face when you have a big brand are also big problems, but they come from the same place.
Mhm.
It's the consumer and what they value that gives meaning to the brand. When that value erodes, and it can happen to a large brand, then eventually that impacts the financial value of that brand and the
Mhm.
financial results of the business. So in this one case, in the confectionery business, everything had to be changed because only the name in like a 30, 40-year-old brand that had been there, had been very successful and a market leader, was tanking because there was this loss of relevance with the Canadian consumer. Now, in that case, by doing the appropriate understanding of what consumers really wanted, I found out that everything had to be changed.
Mhm.
Nothing stayed this where it was. It's only the name that remained, and everything had to be changed because the product itself needed to change. The formats, the packaging, the visual expression, the communication, the pricing, the trade structure. Everything had to be redone in order to recapture market share. But it cannot be done if you do it incrementally. So that the biggest learning that I would like to share with your audience is that you cannot say and fix things little by little. At
Mhm.
one point, you have to say, in order to be competitive and have that edge against big competitors, you need to take a good look at the business and maybe decide that very little things that you have are useful for the future.
Now you think about that. I mean, one of the first things that an entrepreneur needs to do to build a brand investors love is to figure out not just product market fit, but product customer fit. So it's not only, hey, there's a group of people who need underarm deodorant, but I'm creating an underarm deodorant that they're actually going to like, that an individual is actually really going to like. And it's the curse of the founder that this thing is tiring and long and you got to throw things away, but it never gets any better. I mean, that's what you're telling me.
Exactly. And just as in this case, which was $70 million brand that was tanking, it came back to market leadership. I can tell you that it had lost almost 10 share points and we regained them by virtue of recalibrating and redoing everything. But to your point, the big opportunity for startups and the people that I work with in this space is that it takes time to figure out the brand promise. A lot of entrepreneurs start with the product promise, and products are not a competitive advantage. And a lot of startups don't like it when I say that, but it's true. I can prove it.
Mhm,
Anything that's related to a product attribute can be copied, imitated. Someone can do it for less. They will figure it out.
mhm,
If you look at the big brands, they don't win on products. They win on brand promise that the product supports. But the promise is the most important thing. And when founders, when startups spend enough time, and I wouldn't say spend, invest enough time and effort to figure out what is it exactly that consumers want, not what they need,
mhm.
what they want, and create a relevant and distinctive promise that they want to pay a premium price for, then the next thing is to create and fulfill that promise with a product or a service or an experience. So there is a big misconception in startups that say, well, you have to go from product focus to brand focus. You can't do that. What you can do is start with the promise, which is the brand, and then
Mhm,
fulfill it with the product. Just like in the case of this $7 million
mhm,
confectionery brand, the promise was good. People were still excited about the promise. It needed to be refixed, recalibrated for the 21st century.
mhm.
But once that it was fixed and people say, yes, I love that idea and I like it, I want it, I'm ready to pay a premium for it, then we changed everything that we need to get. We got rid of most of the like things that I said. I mean, the product, we had to recalibrate and redo the product line again. And that was okay because we were not, um, you know, attached to the product. That
Mhm.
was probably my biggest win in that case, to convince the organization that it was not the product that was going to save the business. It
Mhm.
was the brand promise, and then we can go and make the product with whatever we need, as long as it delivers the promise.
Yeah.
So that is a big learning that I found relevant, not only for big brands, but also for, especially when you're talking about businesses that are under 10 million or 20 million. That is a crucial moment where you need to start creating that value at a much bigger pace than ever before,
Well,
because
I always say it's crossing the chasm. That's an old familiar term to most folks, but you've got the adoption curve. It goes from early adopters up to the mainstream. And most people go, well, I'm just going to grease along. I'll create a product and it'll grease along from early adopters and then it'll go into the mainstream. And it doesn't. It hits somewhere because early adopters want a product they can fiddle with, a thing that fulfills a utility. Mainstream consumers want trust, reliability, social proof. They want to know that this thing is something Shreddies, Budweiser, McDonald's, something they've had 100 times, a million times. That's what they value. And it can't be suddenly a product that's transformed into a brand. There has to be a bigger brand created that the product fits under. And that I think is, I mean, when I worked on big brands, nobody said, it's the Bud Light. They always said it's Budweiser. It's the promise of Budweiser and what it stands for. And Bud Light fulfills on that promise. And
exactly.
I think a lot of founders, that's Greek to them because they're engineers. They build stuff.
Exactly. And that's why that's a great point, Mark. And that's why they need marketing minds like yours or like many other smart people in the market to guide them through that process. Because it is hard. Like I work with a lot of great minds that are coming from the engineer world. And it is hard to go into consumer first because the training is different. You need
Hmm.
to consider what do consumers value, and it only makes sense to them. Now, when consumers value what they value, sometimes people say, well, we have great quality. How do you know? Well, we make a great product. No, that's not quality. Quality is defined by the consumer. It's perceived quality, it's perceived value.
Hmm.
If that were not the case, look at how many products, and I invite your audience to think about the products you buy.
Hmm.
A lot of them are not the best products. You believe they're the best products, but they're not the best products. You believe the promise.
Hmm.
You believe there is a big promise around it. And then the product delivers the promise. But
Hmm.
actually, in blind tests, and I can tell you that from many big brands who do consistent and frequent like
Product
blind
test, yeah.
tests in blind, where you don't disclose the brand, they don't win over the competition.
Hmm.
Sometimes they do, but many times they don't. How is it that they can charge a premium when they're not the better product? It's the benefit value that people pay a premium for. I worked at J&J. I had the opportunity to run the Tylenol business, for example. And it's a fascinating business. It's all marketing because it's so the actual product is so regulated. You cannot change the performance of the product.
Hmm.
It is what it is. I mean, Health Canada says this is what it is. These are the claims. These are the indications. This is the formula. There is no way to move. How
Hmm.
is it that you can charge a 40-50% premium over private label? What is it that drives it? It's not the product.
Yeah.
What
It's
is
brand
it?
trust. Yeah.
It's trust.
Yeah.
It's that value that we have built in people's minds. And that's why you get people loving Tylenol or Benylin or Advil or whatever brand you trust. And that's why private label only has a fraction of that market.
Yeah. What's funny about that though is that even inside of brands, I was raised on McDonald's and I worked on McDonald's. I love McDonald's. And there's a funny thing because even inside of McDonald's, there's brand loyalty. So you got the quarter pounder and the Big Mac. And
Mhm.
you can have a quarter pounder guy, and a quarter pounder guy doesn't need a Big Mac, and a Big Mac guy doesn't need a quarter pounder. They're the same thing. And you're going, figure that out for me. And so when you talk to an engineer who goes, I can't launch because I have to fix this and I have to fix that and I have to fix it, you're going, Big Mac, quarter pounder, Pepsi, Coke, doesn't matter. You have to have that perceived value, that perceived benefit. The product will come along.
The product will come along. And then at one point, you may have to get rid of the product and
Which is a
then
big
replace
reason
it.
right there, right?
Yeah,
Because if you hinge your success on Peloton, the bicycle, what happens when Schwinn comes along?
exactly.
You know, well,
That's a great example.
we saw
That's a
what
great
happened.
example. That's a great. And if you look at all of the big brands, that's how they have built value. You worked at P&G, which is like the temple of
Mm-hmm.
brand. They work on the brand proposition really, really hard. And then they deliver outstanding products too. But for example, this might sound familiar. I mean, I'm sure it does because you work there. Tide. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
fantastic technology to clean stuff. I mean, it's actually remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic product. But do they ever tell you that? What do they say? If
No,
it
it's
has
all,
to be clean, it has to be Tide.
yeah.
And it's clean, tight, clean, tight. One day I was giving a keynote and I talked about clean. And then they say, well, Peter, clean is not unique. And I said, it doesn't have to be. Every entrepreneur says, well, I have to have a unique product. No, you don't.
No,
It's
no.
not about the product. It's not about being unique. You can be unique and bad. You have to be distinctive. And being distinctive means delivering a benefit that people want. That's when the magic happens. That's when clean becomes powerful. And tight is clean, clean is tight. And then you create a whole narrative under that. But no one can step into those shoes other than Tide because they have created that value that people perceive to be so important for them. And then every time they buy it, they say, oh, yeah, actually it works. And now the new pockets, yeah, they work. And,
Mhm.
all of that stuff. And only God knows what will come next. Tide will be there for ages to come.
You
The
know, it's funny.
products
It's
will
funny
not.
because um, from working a lot with startups too, I always stress, you don't want to be the best, you want to be the only.
Yeah.
And but people confuse the only with a product, the only product that does this or that. And you're going, if your product is cursed with being successful, I can tell you that you'll be the only for about 5 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Going to rip you off and do it for half the price. You won't be the only. You can only be the only in somebody's head, which is a value proposition based on an emotion, based on a brand, you know?
Exactly. I mean, I think you said it beautifully, Mark. I think that is the holy grail. And for your audience, for every startup that is wondering how am I going to create value that I can realize not only getting to 10 million, but to 20 million and beyond, it's it's the only path to get there is by creating that value that people want to pay a premium for. And I emphasize this frequently because usually, especially this inflationary and recessionary, potentially recessionary times, people say, well, we have to manage our price and our expectations. No, no. I mean, just think about you, the more people perceive the value, they will prioritize your brand over other things. They will be willing to give you their money for the benefit they perceive. And that is true. I mean, I was just talking in I had a panel just earlier today about how do you market in those environments, especially for new companies.
Mhm.
Well, you always have to think about the lipstick effect. And the lipstick effect is that effect that in recessionary times, people stop spending on the on the big tickets. Maybe they cannot go to Europe for 2 weeks and spend $10,000. But for the love of Pete, I will buy my lipstick, the best one I can buy, the super premium, because I need to treat myself. Where is that want? Is that a need? No, it's a want. I
Mhm.
want to treat myself. I cannot go to Milan for 2 weeks, but I will treat myself to the best steak that I can have. I want to have the best beer that I can buy. I'm going to go get the best wine that I can find. And all of a sudden, you're actually paying a lot more for products that probably are not justified to be that expensive. But why do you do that? Because you perceive that value. We forget that. And that is in inflationary times. And that happens in a number, 60% of my clients are in Canada, but 40% more or less are outside. And that's a universal truth. It's true in Europe, it's true in Australia, it's true in South America, it's true in Asia. People want to fulfill their wants, dreams, aspirations, and they do it with brands. That's why
Mhm.
brands are so valuable. The biggest brands, and I was just at the awards for the biggest brands, the most valuable brands in Canada and global, they continue to beat and outperform the Fortune 500
Yeah.
every time. The Fortune 500 goes like this, which is always kind of like in a good trend in the
Mhm.
long term. And then the top 100 brands are always ahead in terms of value, in terms of profit, in terms of why. The only reason is that they are focused on building brands. And
You know what's funny about that though? It's when I worked with great marketers inside Procter, inside Unilever, inside McDonald's, et cetera, et cetera. These were people who were schooled in this in the corporate school. And I know that what you do a lot of is take marketers in big brands and you school up the puppies, the babies, the junior marketers, because this is a discipline. And I think a lot of the challenge with founders and startups lies in that they went to engineering school. And so this is a foreign concept. And you go, brand, it's kind of fluffy. It's a logo, it's a jingle, it's a color. No, it's not. But they understand a thing, and a brand isn't a thing. A brand lives in the consumer's mind. And
Lives in the consumer's mind.
that's where people like you are so valuable.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, but you know, one of the things that I have found is that getting the new generation of business leaders, like marketers, is very important. But at the same time, I have found that in the world of startups, precisely for that reason, that a lot of people are a CEO of a company and they never had the opportunity to do marketing
Mm-hmm.
or brand management. Uh, Providing the simplest way to understand those processes, because this is at the end of the day not difficult to do. It is just if you see it from an engineering perspective, there is a blueprint for each one of these things. Building a brand has a blueprint. There is a very physical aspect to, and a very well-rounded aspect in every.
Well, there's a methodology, right?
There's a methodology.
There's steps like building a widget.
There's steps. Yeah, it's you do A, then you do B. Like for to build a brand, you have to make it relevant. I mean, people need to care about it. How do
Yeah.
you do that? There is a step by
Uh-huh.
step path. You have to make it distinctive. What does that mean? You have to talk about benefits, not attributes, because they connect to the relevance. And it has to be purposeful, because that is how you operate. That's how you bring your business to life. That's how you behave with your employees. That's how you behave with your investors. That's why they feel comfortable with you speaking about investment in your
Mm-hmm.
business. When those three things are together, that what I just described is a framework. It's a blueprint. When people do that, and it's not easy to do, I mean, it takes effort to do, but when you do that, then you have all of the elements that you need in order to create a brand expression. And by the way, I haven't spoken about color, I haven't spoken about logo, I haven't spoken
No.
about tagline. All of this is strategic. When you have this, then you can build around that the elements. And by the way, this is true for, I have seen that work in like $100 million brands. It works on $10 million businesses, and it works on you as a professional. When you can create the brand that you bring forward and people want to give you $10 million on investment, it is not because only your product is interesting. It is because you have built the trust based on these elements of
Mm-hmm.
brand marketing. They believe in that.
Yeah.
And the process is exactly the same. Maybe that's what will go in my tombstone. It's my epitaph will be, what did I find is that the principles of brand management and brand positioning apply to brands no matter what size. It's almost like a law of gravity. The same thing for brands. It
That's
is
a that's a
exactly,
long tombstone.
that's a long tombstone. I have to hire a marketer to make it
Gotta
shorter.
get a good copywriter. I
No,
think
I'd be terrible.
mine will be he wasn't that good, but he had a great brand.
Yeah, there you go. But that's what made him great.
Yeah, what made him great was a good brand.
What made him great was
Wasn't that
his brand.
he didn't wash white or whites, but
Yeah,
he had a good story. And
yeah. Well, that's amazing. You know, I think that for your audience, I think it's what's very important is, if I had to suggest something,
Mhm.
it would be, it pays to it pays to be a little it pays to be open. It pays to be open to knowing what you can do really well. And if you're an engineer, if you are a founder, then acknowledge that some help doing this might be very valuable.
Yeah.
I don't know, probably you've heard about the founder syndrome.
Of course, yeah, the inside the jar syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a reluctant, sometimes I find easier to, you know, to express these ideas and get people to accept help in mid-sized companies, because they say, yeah, no, I think that we're not really good here, we need some help. Many founders are open, but many are not. and they say, well, no, 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 that's very fluff. That if you're not a founder, then I don't want to talk to you. If you're not a founder, you don't know what I go through. If you're not a founder, you don't struggle with the same things. Yes, probably not. And that's probably a good thing.
Hmm.
So what could you leverage from people like Marc Stoiber, who has all of this knowledge that could be applied to growing your business? And I think that being open would be my humble suggestion to every entrepreneur who wants to build value and actually see results that they can capitalize and make a reality faster.
Now, with that shameless plug for my business, we are going to conclude because it's not going to get any better than that. But Peter, I so appreciate this, and we're going to come back and do this again, and we're going to talk about the brand narrative. So I'm going to bring you back in about a month or something like that because you have so much value to bring.
Well, thank you
And
so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
I'm going to plug this interview shamelessly because I think that founders really need to hear this message. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure joining you. And thanks to all of your audience. And I hope that you find value in these ideas and that you can put them to work for you. Thank you
Awesome.
very much for
Thank
the
you.
invitation.
Thank you.